I'm not even going to ask Anna because if she says no, I'll be heartbroken because I already know she tunes me out on a daily basis. This would just be confirmation.
I've never heard her say that.
But I tune Stefan out.
Oh,
Darcy's a good liar.
Welcome to Spedsplaining, where special education gets decoded one case at a time. I'm Stefan, a former classroom teacher and current instructional coach, and I'm joined by three brilliant minds in special education, Darcy, Anna, and Leanne. Each week, they take real stories, often from right here in Washington, and break them down into plain language. We use these stories as a launch pad to explore the wild, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating world of general and special education. Whether you're an educator, parent, advocate, or just curious about how the system really works, we've got you. Let's dive in.
So my case is about a second grade little girl who I'm sure is a very sweet child with a lot of needs. And there's an element of this that is about an AT eval. Stefan, I talked to you about an AT eval just last week,
yes,
I think.
You did. And had you not said
what
that,
is AT?
Assistive technology or adaptive technology. There's a difference. Assistive and adaptive. Right. So is this adaptive tech? Oh, assistive. Okay. I was going with my gut.
So you may not know that there's a section of the IEP where the team has to consider if students need assistive technology or not. But I would say that it's an underdeveloped area of evaluation for our districts. And it's just a small piece of this, but I wanted to point out that this includes that. And like, what does a good, thorough AT evaluation contain and look like, and who does that process? But this little girl started in preschool and she has some very significant communication delays, and has, at one point, there was a meeting where the school said that they think that she might have autism, but that they don't diagnose that. And so they would have to go and get that diagnosis from someone else. So they were Yeah, that was a little concerning. Do you want to say why, Darcy?
Please.
Yeah, we do have an educational diagnosis category of autism. So a school can determine that as a disability in our ed system. It is not the same as a medical diagnosis. And if we're going to tell a family that they need the medical diagnosis, guess what we just did? We obligated ourselves to pay for it.
Oh.
We sure did.
I'm not sure it was said. It says that they said you should talk to your pediatrician about that. So maybe didn't quite obligate the district, but.
Well, and Stefan, your face looked a little confused on the difference between a educational diagnosis versus a medical.
Yeah. Well spotted. So could somebody explain that to me? Educational versus medical.
Medical.
An educational. Sorry.
Go ahead, Anna.
An educational one isn't really like a diagnosis. It's saying we see the need for these services. You can still qualify for an IEP with it and get the services that you need here. It doesn't classify you with insurance and outside therapies and medication, right? Like that comes from a doctor. But at school, we can give you the supports that you need.
So a school diagnosis would open the doors for supports, SDI, all that stuff within school bounds, will do nothing for you outside of academia. A medical diagnosis would do both.
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah, you don't, just because you have a medical diagnosis doesn't automatically qualify you for services at school.
I knew that because there's something about it's not arbitrary, a number of prongs and an approach that would qualify you for services.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Nice
They're
work.
such good teachers.
Nice work.
I'm learning.
Yeah, so there's 14 categories that you can qualify for, and autism is one of them. So a student might meet eligibility for that category, but through the school system. But that doesn't mean that they are going to have access to the medical services. But there were also a lot of other areas that the parents felt like there were needs, like central auditory processing disorder that we call CAPD in the speech and language world. Have you heard of that? Anyone?
I have.
I know you guys have.
I think that
does anyone have a clear picture
question.
of what that is?
Yeah, I had a student with that when I was teaching life skills.
I also think it's super interesting that the parent knows to explicitly say that this is a concern. It makes me wonder what that background is, because most parents don't come in and go, CAPD, whatever, like I have the diagnosis down, go look for it, right? Like, so that just leaves me curious.
Well, there were a lot of private evaluations going on.
Okay.
Well, and that's what I didn't even know this was like a role that existed. Outside schools. When I was over presenting at the AI Summit in early February, whenever that was, I was contacted by a community advocate for parents of students with special needs, and she kind of did that as like a side gig. And her whole thing was like, how do you support parents in like advocating for themselves with schools? And again, this is west side of Washington, and so I didn't know that was a thing. So is it possible that this family's like also accessing someone like that? Okay.
Yes. So we've talked about IEEs a lot. That independent educational evaluation. There are people out there that do that kind of testing. Gotcha. But these parents were going and getting testing on their own dime to find out what was going on with their child, because this little girl at one point was given a nonverbal IQ test, and she came out at 115, which I don't know if you know what average is, but average being 90 to 110. So she's a bright girl who could not communicate nearly at the level that she could potentially had the capacity for, cognitively.
And the school's only concern was communication?
No, they had more concerns, and they had lots of supports in place, but they weren't putting all these different labels on. Like the family was getting this CAPD and this sensory processing and just all these other opinions, and then bringing them back to the school and saying, here's another opinion that we want you to consider, and we want you to do more and do better with the IEP and keep on bringing in these new pieces.
And the outside evals were more like educational evals or medical or both?
They weren't obtained by the school. So, you can get them through your insurance, so medical, but then you take that evaluation report back to the school and say, now I want you to consider this piece, and write it into the IEP. And so they felt like when they did that the district wasn't considering those pieces and wasn't changing the IEP accordingly, and that their student she was starting to have school refusals because she could not communicate, that the words were stuck in her head, is what the family would say. And that they have this tool, because they got an augmentative device during their private therapy at some point. We have this tool that could help her speak, and it's left on a shelf and not incorporated into her school day.
So the family even went and got the device?
Mm-hmm. So they had means, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. And they were very adamant about having this improve, and kept on coming back to the table with the school, where sometimes key members would be missing from the IEP meeting, like the SLP at one of those. And they knew that there was a sensory processing disorder, which we haven't talked a lot about, sensory. But It's not necessarily an area in the WACs, but it is like a standalone sensory processing disorder isn't going to get you services by itself, but it's a piece of a child's education. If they're self-stimming, if they're looking for sensory, or if they're rejecting sensory, having that opinion and some supports from an occupational therapist can be an important part of their programming. Not necessarily like qualifying them for OT, but having somebody give some recommendations for supports in the classroom for sensory needs. Does that make sense, Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of answered my question as I was asking it, which was, I was going to say, well, then talk to me a little bit more about sensory processing disorders, which got a little experience in, but on like a personal level, like as a parent. So and then one of the things I was going to ask you, again, kind of answered, you said like that self-stimming, and what are some of those ways that could manifest in a classroom? And then I've got one other question about the speech device, but that sensory piece, what are some of those ways that can
sensory
manifest?
Processing is like how your brain is interpreting any sensory input. So touch, smell, taste, right? Like anything like that. So you can over respond to it, or you can have an under responsiveness to it. So sometimes you see it as like a paper cut seems like you broke your arm, because you're so over responsive to that sensory stimuli. Or you could break your arm and feel like you only got a paper cut. I mean, those are obviously very extreme examples, but so in a classroom, depending on what type of sensory processing they're struggling with, or those types of things, it can be really highly impactive in what their needs are and how they're accessing their environment.
Okay.
I can share my fourth grader experience for sensory. He would stand up and tap dance.
Well, that's
just about
cool.
Every 45 minutes,
Wow.
He's been pretty good at it by the end of the year.
Like literally tap dance?
Yes.
What a stud. Any idea why
Which
it
I would
manifested
assume
that
is
way?
like a deep pressure.
Yeah.
Like needing that deep pressure.
For tap dancing? Is it like the vibration through the body? Oh.
Yeah.
Man, the human experience is such a broad spectrum. That is amazing. I'm very glad you told me that. What might be the reason? You said that this family brought this, you said augmentative device. I'm assuming, like I'm picturing a device that helps this early elementary student speak. So maybe some like picturing stuff, and it will like speak words for the child. Am I on the right track there? Okay, so they push buttons and it'll, so they can like advocate for themselves and like communicate.
A voice output device.
Output. Okay. What would be the reason that a parent or a family would buy something like that, gift it to the school for use with their student, and then the school would put it on the shelf?
Well, they were having some challenges with coming to a decision on what method they were going to teach this student to communicate with. We consider an AAC device a high-tech device, and they were using some low-tech options first, like PECS. So PECS is a picture exchange communication system, and they felt like that was where she was developmentally, wasn't really ready for the augmentative device. And she had some speech as well. So it can be really complicated when you have a student that, and I'm not talking about this particular student, but other students that might have some sign language, some words, knows how to use picture cards to communicate, and then also might have a device that has speech output, voice output. And the whole team's like confused on which method are we going to go with. And
sometimes those high-tech ones are really hard because there's 30 folders to get to your name.
Yeah. And they're not kids are running and active and playing, and they're going to have this big, heavy, sometimes device with them, or it's on an iPad and it's an app, and the iPad is a complete distraction anyway, and they don't want to stay in the communication device app. They want to be on YouTube or something. So you're fighting that battle. So there's a lot of reasons why augmentative communication is difficult in the schools. It also requires training, because just like any other human, you're picking up new vocabulary words at a ridiculous rate. And how do you keep that device ahead of the student? Like it's just a ton of work. And then there's a lot of research that says they're not going to learn it if you're not also communicating in that same language with them. So the adults using the device to communicate with the students so that they have a language model, because it doesn't translate to like hearing oral speech and then going, oh yeah, I know how that looks on this device. It's not the same. It's,
it makes
not going to have all the is's and thes in there. It's going to be a lot more just vocab.
Yeah. It makes me think of, watch this. You ready? Here's an acronym of my own. Do you know what the SAMR model is?
Yes.
Dang it. That.
Yes.
Darcy, do you know what the SAMR model is?
There's a visual that goes with it, like a coffee cup or something.
I'm not even going to ask Anna, because if she says no, I'll be heartbroken, because I already know she tunes me out on a daily basis. This would just be confirmation.
I've never heard her say that.
But I tune Stefan out.
Like,
Darcy's a good liar.
Or she's just not listening to you. So
what is it?
SAMR, even if you're just humoring me, substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. It is a framework for thinking about how you implement educational technology in the classroom. It's one of many. There's another TPAC, which is, they all kind of say the same thing, and some of them are more complicated. I like SAMR because it is not complicated. It's just those 4 things, and it's relatively easy to think about. And it's when I'm talking about ed tech best practices with teachers, no matter what content area or grade level, I try to shoehorn SAMR in as much as I can, because it's, again, easy to wrap your head around. What you're talking about here sounds like it falls on the substitution level, which is not bad. I mean, the very quick version of this is substitution is you're using tech to do something that you would normally be doing offline, but it is the exact same task, and now it's online. Augmentation.
So a Google form instead of a worksheet.
There you go. I always use we used to handwrite essays. Now we're typing the essay. Augmentation is there's functional improvement. So maybe you're using spell check to write your essay. Modification is there is, I typically have the thing to look, but you're starting to transform the learning, not just the learning process. And so modification, you're impacting the learning by, like, if you're typing an essay, share button, and you can share and get feedback in the writing process across time and space. Redefinition is you are redesigning the task into a format that you couldn't do without tech. And so it's just about being intentional how you integrate tech when you do it, because there's nothing wrong with substitution with like flashcards, digital flashcards on something like Quizlet. Fine, who cares? But if that's all you're doing, there's going to be learning loss, right? So thinking about this student and the tech and like PECs versus like this speaker device for them, like you could see potentially how that might get in the way for all the things that you just listed. I mean, you just and see, now we're in my world a little bit, and I'm very excited. Like you just described, the digital divide for teachers is they don't know how to navigate this device necessarily. It's too cumbersome for them to use right off the bat. And so, we have a system that works, and so we're going to stick with that system. So we're going to take this fancy schmancy device where the ceiling might be higher. We might be able to communicate more effectively with this, or more fluently or fluidly, but right now, this is what we need in the moment. And so that's part of that instructional design and those decisions that teachers get to make around technology is what we're doing worth the time. And something I tell teachers all the time in the world of tech is if it's getting in the way and the time investment to learn it and implement it is not worth what you're going to get out of it, then it's better to be offline, and that's something I say as an ed tech coach,
And alternative tech is hard regardless in a classroom, because even if you're doing PECs, now you're flipping through 300 pictures to find the word that you want, right? So that carrying a binder around at recess isn't any better than carrying around a bulky iPad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so common to have students that need some kind of access to communication that's not already built in, and have it be a real barrier between them playing with other kids and participating, and then also being able to access the vocabulary within that device. So this little girl started going to the nurse's office a lot more than she had earlier in kindergarten. At the end of kindergarten, she was going much more and was having somatic symptoms or complaints. So not necessarily having any kind of physical ailment, but thinking that or expressing that she did because of all of the anxiety that was going on in her body, not being able to access school or peers or social as well, potentially. So then at some point, her progress in her IEP goals and in her general education started to decline. So if we're thinking back to those three pieces from the Andrew F. case, which ones do you see being at issue right now? We have if you want to restate those.
I'm just flipping back a couple pages in my notes here. So those three things were setting appropriate goals, procedural compliance, and implementation fidelity. It seems like we're hovering around that implementation fidelity piece a little bit.
How so?
Ooh, great question. Very, very, very good question. I think because you had mentioned there was maybe a little bit of confusion about the way some of the things were, like they were having trouble deciding on different communication methods, or you said that was a potential problem in some areas. And then also, if they have all of these different accommodations, like if you're saying there's like 56 pages worth of different things they could be doing or different parts of this case, I could see them kind of flitting around to different places and not really settling on one, and then not really doing anything like super effectively. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I barking up the right
there
tree?
is one example of that I haven't shared yet, that because of the 56 pages, but there was a point where they had paraeducator support and they failed to maintain that. So that absolutely goes to what you're saying, but I didn't share that yet.
Intuitive.
So that would have been one of those, like, we talked about doing this, but then we didn't actually do it. But the other two pieces of those three prongs also were violated.
Oh,
if you think about if you think about the procedures, like what was the procedure error that I mentioned?
Oh, I got so down the rabbit hole. You have to give me with the ed tech thing. You're gonna have to give me that one again.
But I mentioned that they were holding IEP meetings where not all the team members were there.
Yeah. That's an issue. Yeah, you would. Okay. Yep.
And also
you can excuse people from an IEP team meeting, but it should be things where parents need to, or guardians need to excuse, and it should be when their section isn't the most important. But to do one without the SLP when all you're talking about is communication is a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well,
and you can excuse them with parent consent, and I'm guessing that was not given.
Doesn't sound like it. Well, and that appropriate goals piece too, I'm now thinking if the parents are advocating for something that they think is pushing their child forward, and the school is especially since you had said that thing about the nonverbal IQ test and or the student testing out of 115, which I've also heard you three kind of say, like, you don't put a ton of stock in like IQ tests, and they're not always static, they're kind of moving, but it's something to consider. But if this student is presenting as like very intelligent, very capable, and communication is that barrier, and school is setting expectations and goals lower, academically less rigorous than the family feels like they need to be or they should be, I can see them kind of getting rung up on, you're not pushing this kid hard enough, and you're not meeting this kid's needs and providing them the accommodations to help them succeed at a high level.
Mm-hmm. And then they also, when they got all those outside evaluations, weren't considering and taking some of those pieces that came from other experts and then putting them into the student's plan. Okay. So that also would be a procedural error, but also, could hit that rigorous piece.
Before we guess what happened, I have a clarifying question. Mm-hmm. Because we recently did one where all three of those rally points, right? They failed all of them. And I wonder if it's going to be different because of the circuit it was in. So I'm curious where that other case happened. And if Leanne, the case you're talking about right now was in Washington or was it somewhere else?
Yes, mine was in Washington.
Ah.
I also thought that was interesting when I found out that last case with the 3 failures.
Yeah, because you know what happened on this one. So, all right.
I do. Yeah.
So maybe we can explain to Stefan why the circuit makes a difference.
And what a circuit is. You're talking like the circuit, like the ALJ, like judge circuit thingy. Okay, that one I've got. But why does the circuit make a difference?
I don't know if this is like a legally correct answer, but typically circuits have their own kind of culture, just like in our region, ESD, each school has its own culture. And so circuits kind of have like our community thinks this is okay and this is the finding. So if I'm in Pennsylvania and I go, your comp ed is 2,000 hours, Washington might be like, well, that's ridiculously silly because you can't do it. So you get 40 hours. Like you often see things, it makes a difference where you're at.
Okay. And that checks out to me, right? You've got humans in this system, and we try as much as we can to like build structures and systems that are relatively consistent, but there's always going to be that human element and variation in there. Okay.
Yeah, like that last case, I think the highest one I've ever seen in Ninth Circuit was one that we talked about. It was like 200 hours. And the family actually went back and said, that's ridiculous. Can you reduce it?
And that I remember. My guess is since you said there's a failure in all 3, I'm assuming the district is getting lit up. Maybe, and then just taking with what Darcy said, maybe not quite as high as the case we talked about before with the other 3 failures. But I think this district, it's always comp ed, right? They're definitely going to be getting some kind of comp ed if they're not meeting these 3 prongs coming out of Rowley. How much I don't know. If that other highest, I got like 80 hours of comp ed would be my guess. But you also said they went to like independent services. You said they went to and got some independent evaluations. Did they get outside services as well?
Yes.
They're getting reimbursed for those.
They asked for reimbursement for that, for 100%. Sure.
Because they did it beforehand, which I just learned like an hour ago. They did it beforehand. And so since they went and got those services because they weren't getting their needs met at the school, they're asking for reimbursement. And I'm guessing they're going to get that as well.
And they also ask for reimbursement of those IEEs, right?
Yeah, I would guess that they would ask for that as well. I'm with Stefan. I think they got lit up. I think they're going to get hit pretty hard on this one with reimbursement for attorneys, reimbursement for all of the assessments they've had within the last 2 years, private speech that you probably didn't tell us they were going to, all of the things.
Well, they got the private speech eval, and yes, they continued with services.
Yeah.
This was probably one of the most punitive, I would say, outcomes I've seen. So in Washington, they were ordered 150 hours of one-on-one specialized instruction delivered by a special ed teacher.
Wow. By a teacher too.
Then they also got 50 hours of speech SLP time from the district and 15 hours of indirect SLP time teaching staff and collaborating with staff. So that's another 65. And then they had to reimburse the parents for out-of-pocket expenses, including OT, SLP. And then they also got an assistive technology evaluation that had to be paid for district expense and training follow-up using the tools that were recommended by the AT evaluation. And they asked for a facilitated IEP, actually, that was ordered by the ALJ, and the district would have to pay for the private providers to attend, including their mileage. Oh, and one more thing. They also owe the family extended school year services because of the regression and recruitment.
Ooh.
Could you?
That is the most punitive one we've had.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
I mean, that hurts the district pretty badly. And I'm going to be honest, like, that's a rough relationship from now on.
Yeah, the ALJ actually said this is about repairing trust and rebalancing the educational opportunity that the student missed. I'm like, I don't know that everyone's going to be like repaired after this.
Yeah, it does
make
not
parents
feel
feel
like
a little
warm
better,
and
I think.
fuzzy.
So they really, really missed some places where they could have shown up and paid attention to how much this family was going out of their way to like, hey, my kid, pay attention to my kid.
So, like, systemically, as district directors, how do you prevent that? I mean, like we said, this isn't the first like AAC device case that we've seen. So, what is a better way that districts could be ensuring that those devices are utilized appropriately and not on a shelf?
That is such a fidelity question.
Yeah. I mean, I love that something like this, the good that could come from it is teams talking about when we do recommend an AAC device, what are we going to do to wrap around? Because the SLPs usually are seeing students 30 minutes a week, somewhere in there. That's not going to be enough time to program, train, do services with the student, just all the pieces. It needs to be a real team effort because communication happens all day long. And I just don't think that I see that very often.
Well, and from a ed tech lens, like I'm going to speak, I mean, I've only done a little bit of stuff with assistive tech in SPED classrooms because that's a whole other beast in and of itself because those are I mean, I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but such specialized equipment. What I see with tech in districts is oftentimes it goes unused just because people straight up don't know how to use it and don't have the time to learn, which is where you need dedicated time to just build the foundational skills for using the tech. Because until you know some basic fundamental ins and outs, that you can't even begin to think about implementation. And so you could, I don't know how much these assistive tech like readers cost, probably a pretty penny. And if you have a parent like buy one of these things for their kid, I could see myself as a teacher feeling guilty a little bit that they spent thousands of dollars in this thing. And like, essentially what you've given me is a burden, because I need to take my time to, and that's a negative spin on it for sure, but you've given me a chore. I've got to now take my time to learn this stuff on my own time. You're not going to dedicate professional development for me because it was bought privately to learn how to use this thing. And then I have to think about implementing it and changing the structure of my classroom. And sure, that is a teacher's job. That is what teachers do all the time. But it's part of the reason technology is looked at as a luxury when it's not. It is absolutely a necessity, especially in some sped worlds. And I get that's biased, but it's something that like kids need moving forward, but it's so easy to kind of push to the side because it takes an initial time investment to learn. And so when we're thinking about like, I know we don't have a ton of time, but I'd be super interested. And I know you and I are going to be digging into this in the future, like assistive technology, like evals and stuff and like what that looks like, because so much of that in our world, at least my world, is supporting teachers with just basic onboarding, digital navigation. How do I use this thing so I can start leveraging my expertise as a good teacher and combine it with this technology? So teachers just need that support at a base level.
And I think like I've seen too where private speech has one device and school is trying to do something different. And it's like, let's communicate. Let's get on the same page for what we're doing so that the kid can have the same mode of communication at home and at school and in their community.
Yeah, there's so much variety within AAC. I mean, there's new apps that come out every day, probably at least every month. So you can't even, it's hard to keep up with which apps are available. And then some of them use a different language model. So some of them are better at generating sentences and actual, like more complex language. And then others are, you have a field of 4 pictures to choose from, and that's it. You're not stringing words together. And I mean, there's just such a huge range. So the more these devices get out there, the more a teacher could be dealing with 8 different systems. And so I understand like how complicated this stuff is, but I definitely, this made me think about it more. Like, well, what is this? What do we need to be doing? Definitely there's a training piece that's missing everywhere I've ever worked. And with technology, you know how rapidly that's changing. So, and some people's comfort level is so different than others, where I would poke around and figure it out. Like other people aren't wanting to do that. They think they'll break the device. And then you have the other complicated piece that you probably don't know about, where the device should be in all settings so that the student is learning how to use it at home and at school. And that going back and forth presents lots of challenges. Is it charged? Did it show up every day? Are they using it? Are they changing the programming? Sometimes kids can even figure out how to delete the whole dang thing.
Dude, you are talking to a former 7th grade English teacher whose 120 students all had their own Chromebook they took to and from school. You think I don't know the challenges of charged devices and whether or not they're in the classroom? But that being said, you're also talking about, like, I'm sitting here going, you know, you got to train the teacher on how to use this thing. It means you also need to, if they're going between classes, you need to train the other teachers. Like, everybody needs this onboarding. You know, it is a much more complicated system than, like I was even describing a second ago.
Yeah. And it's so easy just to get the device and then say, here. And people think that is the battle. It's not. I mean, like, yeah, it's a battle to get a device sometimes, but that doesn't actually by itself do anything for anybody if you're not using it, clearly.
Yeah, once you get the device,
like my dream with that from the system side would be that the director would be involved, and that the director would know that those pieces that Leanne was talking about need to be in place. Where's the training? Who's getting it? Who's got the charger cords? Like those things. And that is, I say you can't over communicate. The communication time that takes is one of the reasons why case managers and SLPs and things like that have smaller caseloads than your general ed teachers. Yeah.
I had to make a face at that. I'm like,
yeah, they do. And from Leanne's SLP background, that one time a week is not going to do it. The speech person is not the manager of that equipment or the person who makes sure that it is with the kid all the time and that it's being used.
Yeah, that buy-in piece is really challenging. So you have a para that needs to buy in, you have a special ed teacher that needs to buy in, gen ed teachers, parents, everyone needs to buy in. And it's very rare that you have everybody with the same, you know, vision, if not even, you know, being able to even communicate about this without frustration, because communication is a basic need. It's not like you're learning advanced calculus or something. Like communication, you don't have quality of life without it. So there's a lot of emotion on that topic as well.
Thanks for tuning in to Spedsplaining. If you've got questions or thoughts about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to our links where you can drop your questions, join the conversation, and connect with us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode if you found it helpful. Until next time, keep on learning and stay curious.